I'm sitting in a police interrogation room, my hands still shaking from adrenaline, watching through the one-way glass as my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to every school play, who called me my little princess, realizes he's been caught. He's pacing like a caged animal, running his fingers through his graying hair the way he always does when he's stressed. But this isn't stress about a work deadline or a bad golf game. This is the panic of a man who killed his own father for a life insurance payout and then tried to silence the only witness who could prove it. I reported my father, the murderer, to the police. Let me take you back to where this nightmare actually began, because the story everyone thinks they know, the story of the tragic accident that took my grandfather's life, is a lie. And I'm the one who's about to burn that lie to the ground. My name is Jennifer, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect family. Not perfect in the Instagram influencer way, but perfect in the way that mattered. We had Sunday dinners, inside jokes, and a kind of love that felt unshakable. My grandfather, Richard, was the patriarch, a self-made millionaire who built a construction empire from nothing but grit and a willingness to outwork everyone else. My father, David, was his golden child, the heir apparent who'd taken over the business and, according to everyone, was running it even better than the old man ever did. And me? I was the favorite grandchild. The one Grandpa Richard would slip an extra 20 to at family gatherings. The one he'd take fishing every summer at his lake house, where he'd tell me stories about growing up poor in rural Pennsylvania, about his first construction job at 14, about building something that would outlast him. Legacy isn't about money, Jennifer, he'd say, his weathered hands expertly tying a fishing lure. It's about the people you choose to be for the people you love. I believed him. God, I believed every word. But my father heard something different in those words. He heard a promise. He heard an inheritance. And when that inheritance didn't come fast enough, he decided to accelerate the timeline. The official story is this: on March 15th, at approximately 11:47 p.m., my grandfather suffered a fatal fall down the stairs of his home. He'd been drinking, there was a wine glass found shattered near his body, red wine soaking into the Persian rug my grandmother had loved before she passed. The medical examiner ruled it an accident. Blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a fall. No signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. Just a tragic accident involving an elderly man who probably had one glass too many and lost his footing on stairs he'd climbed 10,000 times before. My father discovered the body. He was the one who called 911, his voice breaking over the phone. My dad, oh God, my dad's not breathing. He fell. There's so much blood. I remember that call. I was at college, 3 hours away, cramming for a biology exam when my phone lit up at 1:30 a.m. Dad's name on the screen. I knew before I answered that something was horribly wrong. My father never called late unless it was an emergency. Jennifer, sweetheart. His voice was raw, destroyed. Grandpa's gone. There was an accident. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I drove through the night, tears blurring my vision, my heart feeling like it had been hollowed out with a spoon. I made it home by dawn, walked into my childhood house where family was already gathering, and let my father pull me into a hug that felt like the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted off its axis. We'll get through this, he whispered into my hair. We have each other. That's what matters. And I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? This was my dad. My hero. The man who'd never lied to me about anything that mattered. Except he had. About everything. The funeral was massive. Grandpa Richard was beloved, not just by family, but by the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods he'd built, by the charities he'd quietly funded, by the community he'd helped develop. The line of mourners stretched around the block. People told stories about his generosity, his tough but fair management style, his terrible jokes that somehow always landed. My father gave the eulogy. He stood at that podium in his crisp black suit, his voice steady despite the tears that occasionally escaped, and painted a picture of a man who'd been larger than life. My father taught me that success means nothing if you can't share it with the people you love. He taught me that integrity isn't optional, it's the foundation everything else is built on. And he taught me that family isn't just blood. It's choice. And I choose, every single day, to honor his memory by living the values he instilled in me. The congregation nodded. People dabbed at their eyes. I sat in the front row, clutching tissues, thinking about how proud Grandpa would have been of that speech. I had no idea I was listening to a murderer eulogize his victim. The weeks after the funeral blurred together. I took a leave of absence from college to help my father manage the estate. Grandpa Richard had been organized. Meticulously so, but there were still hundreds of details to handle. Insurance claims to file. Properties to assess. Business decisions to make. Legal paperwork that seemed endless. My father threw himself into work with an intensity that worried me. He was at the office before dawn, home after midnight, surviving on coffee and what I suspected were sleeping pills. When I'd ask if he was okay, he'd give me that sad smile and say, "Keeping busy is the only thing keeping me sane, Jennifer. The moment I stop moving, I'll fall apart." I understood that. Grief is a predator that hunts the still. What I didn't understand, what I wouldn't understand for another 2 months, was that he wasn't grieving. He was hiding. The inheritance was substantial. $7 million in liquid assets. Another $12 million in properties, business equity, and investments. Grandpa had set up a trust that was supposed to be distributed according to a specific plan. 40% to my father, 30% to my Aunt Caroline, 20% split among the grandchildren, and 10% to various charities. But there was a problem. 3 weeks before his death, Grandpa Richard had contacted his lawyer about changing the trust. He wanted to restructure everything. Cut my father's share significantly. The lawyer had scheduled a meeting for March 20th, 5 days after Grandpa's death, to finalize the changes. My father found out about the scheduled meeting when he was sorting through Grandpa's calendar. I was there when he saw it. I watched his face go pale, watched him immediately dial the lawyer with shaking hands. What changes was my father planning to make, he'd asked, his voice tight. The lawyer couldn't, or wouldn't, say over the phone. Attorney-client privilege extended beyond death in certain circumstances. But the implication was clear. Grandpa Richard had been planning to alter the distribution dramatically. And now, with him dead and the changes not yet executed, the original trust stood. My father inherited millions he might have been about to lose. At the time, I interpreted his reaction as shock. Maybe even hurt that Grandpa had been planning changes without discussing them first. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, whatever he was planning, I'm sure he had his reasons. But it doesn't matter now. He loved you, Dad. That's what matters. My father looked at me then with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something between gratitude and, what? Fear? Guilt? You're right, he said quietly. That's what matters. The first crack in the facade appeared in late May. I'd moved back home fully by then, deferring my final semester to help manage things. My father needed support, and I was happy to provide it. We'd fallen into a routine. I'd handle the estate paperwork during the day while he ran the business, and we'd have dinner together at night, swapping stories about Grandpa, keeping his memory alive. One evening, I was organizing documents in Grandpa's home office, a room we'd mostly left untouched since his death, as if preserving it might preserve him somehow. I was filing insurance papers when I found a folder labeled Policy Review, Confidential. Inside was a letter from Grandpa's insurance agent, dated February 10th, just over a month before his death. The letter referenced a recent conversation about my father. Asterisk Richard, as discussed, I'm concerned about the request to increase the policy amount on your life insurance while simultaneously making your son the primary beneficiary. Given the family dynamics you've described, I'd recommend keeping the distribution as outlined in your trust. A $5 million payout to David, given your recent concerns about his business decisions and personal spending, may not be in anyone's best interest. Let's discuss this further before making any changes. Asterisk. I read it 3 times, my brain trying to make sense of the words. Grandpa had taken out a $5 million life insurance policy and made my father the beneficiary. But he'd had concerns about doing it. Concerns about my father's business decisions and personal spending. What business decisions? What spending? My father ran a successful company. We lived comfortably but not extravagantly. He drove a nice car, sure, but nothing ostentatious. Grandpa himself had always praised him for being financially responsible. I kept digging through the folder. Found another document, a printout of text messages between Grandpa and his accountant from early March. Asterisk Richard, I need you to audit David's company accounts. Everything. Don't tell him. Asterisk. Asterisk accountant. Richard, that's highly unusual. Is there something specific you're concerned about? Asterisk. Asterisk Richard, just do it. Quietly. I'll explain when you're finished. Asterisk. Asterisk accountant, understood. I'll have a preliminary report by March 18th. Asterisk. March 18th. 3 days after Grandpa's death. My hands were shaking as I took photos of everything with my phone. I didn't know what I was looking at, but my gut was screaming that something was very, very wrong. I couldn't confront my father. Not yet. I didn't have enough information, and a voice in the back of my head kept insisting there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe Grandpa was just being overprotective. Maybe he'd been getting paranoid in his old age. Maybe. But I couldn't shake the feeling. So I did what any college student with too much time and a true crime podcast addiction would do. I started investigating. First stop, the accountant. I called him under the pretense of handling estate matters, asked if there were any outstanding issues Grandpa had been working on before his death. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Alex, I'm not sure I should discuss this with you. It was a confidential matter between your grandfather and myself. Please, I pressed. If Grandpa was concerned about something, I need to know. I'm trying to protect his legacy. Another pause. Then, reluctantly. Your grandfather asked me to audit the company books. He suspected there might be some irregularities. I was supposed to deliver my findings on March 18th, but after his passing, I didn't know who to give the report to. My heart was pounding. What kind of irregularities? Money being moved in ways that didn't make sense. Payments to shell companies that appeared to have no legitimate business purpose. It wasn't conclusive, I needed more time to trace everything. But your grandfather was right to be concerned. Someone was siphoning money from the business. Roughly $300,000 over the past 18 months. $300,000. Who had access to move money like that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Only executive-level personnel. Your grandfather and your father. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. $300,000. A life insurance policy worth $5 million. And Grandpa planning to restructure his trust to cut Dad's inheritance just days before his fatal accident. It couldn't be what it looked like. It couldn't be. But I had to know for sure. I spent the next week becoming someone I didn't recognize. I went through my father's home office while he was at work, photographing documents, searching for anything that might explain the missing money. I found credit card statements showing charges at upscale restaurants and hotels. Nothing criminal, but definitely more spending than I'd realized. I found receipts for designer watches, custom suits, a golf club membership at an exclusive country club. My father was living a lifestyle that didn't quite match the modest image he projected. But that wasn't proof of murder. Rich people spend money. That's not a crime. Then I found the burner phone. It was hidden in a locked drawer in his desk. A drawer I only got into because I'd watched him enter the combination months earlier when he was retrieving some documents. The phone was cheap, a prepaid model you could buy at any convenience store. And it had been used exactly 4 times. All 4 calls were to the same number. All 4 were made in the 2 weeks before Grandpa's death. The most recent call, March 15th, at 10:32 p.m. An hour and 15 minutes before the 911 call about Grandpa's fall. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I took pictures of everything, the call log, the phone itself, the serial number. Then I put it back exactly as I'd found it and locked the drawer. That night at dinner, I sat across from my father and tried to act normal. We talked about the business, about whether I was ready to return to school in the fall, about the upcoming memorial service we were planning for Grandpa's birthday. "I'm so glad I have you, Jennifer," he said at one point, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't know what I'd do without you." I squeezed back and smiled. "We're family, Dad. That's what we do." And inside, I was thinking, did you kill him? Did you kill your own father? I knew I needed help. Professional help. But I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I didn't have hard evidence, just a collection of suspicious circumstances that might be explained away by a good lawyer. I needed something concrete. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Chen, a former detective who'd left the force to start his own agency. I found him through careful research and even more careful vetting. I met him at a coffee shop in the next town over, somewhere I was certain I wouldn't run into anyone who knew me. "I need you to look into my father," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think he might have killed my grandfather." I expected skepticism. Instead, Marcus just nodded and pulled out a notepad. "Tell me everything." I did. Every suspicion, every document, every phone call. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long moment, tapping his pen against the table. "You understand that if you're right, your life might be in danger," he said finally. "If your father killed once to protect his secrets, he might do it again." The thought had occurred to me. But hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that turned my blood to ice. "I know," I managed. "But I need to know the truth. Whatever it is." Marcus studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Give me 3 weeks. I'll find out who he called on that burner phone, and I'll dig into his finances to see where that 300 grand went. In the meantime, you need to be careful. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Act normal. And if you ever feel unsafe, even for a second, you call me immediately." He gave me his number, his personal cell, not his business line, and made me promise I'd save it under a fake name in my phone. I chose Hannah from biology. Generic enough to be forgettable. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I lived in my childhood home with a man who might be a murderer, smiling over breakfast, discussing mundane household matters, all while my skin crawled every time he hugged me goodnight. I became hyper-aware of everything. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he'd suddenly appear in doorways when I was on the phone. The way he'd casually ask what I'd done that day, as if he was tracking my movements. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe I was finally seeing clearly for the first time. Marcus called me on day 19. "Can you meet me?" Same coffee shop, 1 hour. I told my father I was meeting a friend from college who was in town. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Have fun, sweetheart. Don't stay out too late." The drive felt endless. When I finally walked into the coffee shop, Marcus was already there, a thick folder in front of him. His expression was grim. "You were right," he said without preamble. "Your father killed your grandfather." The words hit me like a physical blow. Some part of me had still been hoping I was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation, that my father was still the hero I'd always believed him to be. But that version of my father was dead. Had been dead, maybe, for longer than I wanted to admit. "Show me," I said. Marcus opened the folder. The burner phone calls were all to a man named Derek Russo. Low-level criminal, mostly scams and fraud. Never anything violent, until your father hired him. Hired him for what? To create an alibi. On March 15th, Derek Russo was paid $5,000 to meet your father at a bar across town from 9 p.m. to midnight. Multiple witnesses can place them there. Security cameras caught them together. Your father made sure he'd be on camera, made sure people would remember seeing him. But Grandpa died at 11:47. Exactly. Your father couldn't have been at your grandfather's house if he was at a bar with witnesses. Except. Marcus pulled out another document. I pulled phone records. Your father's personal cell pinged off a tower near your grandfather's house at 11:35 p.m. He left the bar, drove to the house, and came back. The whole trip took 40 minutes, which gives him plenty of time to push Grandpa down the stairs, I finished numbly. And stage it to look like an accident. The wine glass was a nice touch. Made it look like your grandfather had been drinking. But here's the thing, your grandfather had given up alcohol 2 years ago. Heart medication. His doctor confirmed it. There's no way he was having wine that night. I felt sick. What about the $300,000? Gambling debts. Your father has a serious problem. He's been hemorrhaging money at underground poker games for years. Was in deep with some very bad people. The $300,000 he stole from the company barely covered what he owed. He needed more. The insurance payout. $5 million. Plus whatever inheritance he could salvage. But your grandfather figured it out. Was going to cut him off, probably report the embezzlement. Your father couldn't let that happen. I stared at the documents spread across the table, my entire reality disintegrating. This is enough to go to the police, right? Marcus hesitated. It's enough to raise serious questions. But it's not a slam dunk. A good defense attorney could argue that the phone records are inconclusive, that Derek Russo is lying for attention, that the gambling debts don't prove murder. We need more. What more could we possibly need? A confession. Or evidence that he's trying to cover up what he did. Or. Marcus met my eyes. Evidence that he's willing to kill again to protect his secret. The implication hung in the air between us like poison gas. You think I'm in danger? I think you've been asking a lot of questions. Digging through documents. If your father suspects you know something. Marcus leaned forward. Jennifer, you need to go to the police now. Let them handle this. But I was already shaking my head. They'll need probable cause to investigate. And right now, we don't have enough for that. Any lawyer would tear this apart. You said it yourself, it's not a slam dunk. So what are you proposing? I didn't answer immediately. My mind was working through possibilities, through risks, through the horrible calculus of catching a killer who shared my DNA. I'm proposing, I said slowly, that we make him think I'm onto him. And then we see what he does. Marcus looked at me like I'd lost my mind. That's insane. You're talking about painting a target on your back. I'm talking about getting justice for my grandfather. And making sure my father can't hurt anyone else. I surprised myself with how steady my voice was. But I'm not stupid. I'll need your help. And I'll need the police involved, but at a distance. Ready to move in the second he makes a mistake. Jennifer. He's going to get away with it otherwise, I interrupted. You know he will. Rich guy, tragic accident, no physical evidence. Even if the police investigate, his lawyers will bury everything in motions and procedural delays until the trail goes completely cold. This is the only way. Marcus was quiet for a long time, studying me with an expression that was part admiration, part concern. Finally, he sighed. If we're going to do this, we do it my way. We get the police on board first. We wire you up. And the absolute second, things go sideways, we pull you out. Agreed? Agreed. Okay. He closed the folder. Then let's go catch a killer. The next week was spent planning. Marcus connected me with a detective named Sarah Rodriguez, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking down white-collar criminals. I met her at the police station, in a private room where I laid out everything I'd discovered. She listened without interrupting, taking notes, her expression neutral. When I finished, she sat back and crossed her arms. "This is circumstantial at best," she said. "But it's enough to make me very interested. Walk me through your plan." I did. It was simple, really. Almost elegant in its simplicity. I would tell my father I'd found Grandpa's hidden safe, a safe that didn't actually exist. I'd tell him it contained documents, evidence of something Grandpa had been investigating before his death. I'd imply that I'd found information that contradicted the official story of the accident. Then I'd wait and see how he reacted. If he was innocent, he'd be curious but unconcerned. We'd look through whatever I claimed to find together, probably discover some old business records or personal letters, and life would go on. If he was guilty, he'd panic. And panic makes people sloppy. "You're assuming he'll try to silence you," Detective Rodriguez said. "That's a big assumption. He's your father." "He killed his own father for money," I replied. "What makes you think he'd hesitate to kill me?" She couldn't argue with that logic. The plan was set for the following Friday. I'd be wearing a wire, a sophisticated piece of equipment that looked like a simple necklace. Marcus and Detective Rodriguez would be monitoring from a van parked 2 blocks away. Uniformed officers would be staged around the neighborhood, ready to move in at a moment's notice. "At the first sign of physical danger, we're coming in," Rodriguez emphasized. "I don't care if we have a confession yet or not. Your safety is the priority." I nodded, but we both knew the truth. If my father was really willing to kill me, he'd have to show his hand completely before they could justify breaking in. I had to let the danger get real enough to be prosecutable. I had to let him try. That Friday evening, I came home at 6 p.m., exactly as planned. My father was in the living room, working on his laptop, a glass of scotch on the table beside him, a habit he'd developed since Grandpa's death. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice casual despite the adrenaline making my hands shake. "Can we talk? I found something today." He looked up, and I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Concern? Suspicion? "Of course, sweetheart. What's up?" I sat down across from him, my heart hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. The wire felt like it was burning against my skin, though I knew it was invisible beneath my shirt. I was going through more of Grandpa's things at the lake house, trying to get everything organized for the estate lawyers. And I found something weird. A hidden safe. Behind a false panel in his bedroom closet. My father's face went very still. "A safe? Your grandfather never mentioned a safe to me." "I know. It's strange, right? It was really well hidden. I only found it because I was measuring the closet dimensions and realized the space didn't match up. There's like 2 feet of depth missing." What was in it? This was the moment. The point of no return. Documents. A lot of documents. Financial records from the company. And I paused, looking down at my hands as if I was struggling with what to say. And notes. In Grandpa's handwriting. About discrepancies he'd found. Money that was being moved around in ways that didn't make sense. He was investigating something, Dad. Something big. The silence that followed was suffocating. I forced myself to look up, to meet his eyes. My father's expression was unreadable. "Did you bring these documents home?" "No. I left them in the safe. I wasn't sure what to do with them." I mean, if Grandpa was investigating something at the company, shouldn't we look into it? Finish what he started? Absolutely. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We should definitely look into it. Together. Why don't we drive out to the lake house tomorrow morning? We can go through everything, see what your grandfather was concerned about. Tomorrow morning sounds good, I agreed, even as every instinct screamed at me to run. Should we bring the company lawyers? If there's financial irregularities. Let's look at the documents first, he interrupted smoothly. No point in alarming anyone until we know what we're dealing with. It might be nothing. Your grandfather was getting older. It's possible he was confused about some transactions. Yeah. Maybe. I stood up, manufacturing a yawn. I'm pretty tired. Think I'm going to head to bed early. Good idea. We'll leave around 8 tomorrow. Get an early start. I nodded and headed upstairs, feeling his eyes on my back the entire way. As soon as I closed my bedroom door, I pulled out my phone and texted Marcus. He took the bait. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., Lake House. The response came immediately, we'll be ready. Stay safe. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, wondering if every creak was my father approaching my door. The wire was hidden in my jewelry box, ready to be worn in the morning. My phone was charging on my nightstand, Marcus's number on speed dial. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside my door. I held my breath, my heart threatening to beat out of my chest. The doorknob didn't turn. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated back down the hall. Was he checking on me? Making sure I was asleep? Or was I being paranoid, and he was just getting a glass of water? I didn't know anymore. The lines between reasonable caution and paranoia had blurred so thoroughly I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Morning came eventually, gray and cold. I got dressed in layers, easier to hide the wire. Put on the necklace that would transmit everything my father said. Checked my phone one more time to confirm Marcus and Detective Rodriguez were in position. Downstairs, my father was already waiting, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He smiled when he saw me. Ready to go? Ready. The drive to the lake house took 90 minutes. We made small talk. He asked about my plans to return to school. I asked about the business. Everything was normal. Perfectly, terrifyingly normal. But I kept glancing at his hands on the steering wheel, at the set of his jaw, looking for any sign of what he was really thinking. He gave nothing away. My father had always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping his emotions locked down. I'd once admired that quality. Now it just made him more dangerous. We pulled up to the lake house just after 9:30 a.m. It sat alone on a wooded lot, the nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away. Isolated. Private. The perfect place for... No. I couldn't think like that. Marcus was listening. Police were minutes away. I was safe. I had to believe I was safe. Inside, the house smelled musty from being closed up. My father flipped on lights while I headed toward the bedroom, my pulse racing. So where exactly is this safe? He called after me. In the master closet. I'll show you. He followed me into Grandpa's bedroom, a room that still held traces of him. His reading glasses on the nightstand. His favorite flannel robe hanging on the bathroom door. It felt wrong being here, using his memory as bait in a trap. I opened the closet and gestured vaguely at the back wall. I found the panel right here. You have to push on it in a specific way. I pressed my hand against the wall, pretending to search for the mechanism I'd invented. My father stepped closer, looking over my shoulder. I don't see anything, he said. It's really well hidden. Here, let me. Jennifer. His voice was different now. Flat. Cold. There's no safe, is there? I froze. Turned slowly to face him. He was standing between me and the door, his expression unreadable. You've been lying to me. The question is why? Dad, I don't know what you... Don't. The word cracked like a whip. I'm not stupid, Alex. You've been acting strange for weeks. Sneaking around, asking questions, going through my things. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? My mouth was dry. I don't know what you're talking about. The burner phone. You found it, didn't you? He took a step closer. I came home early one day last week and saw your car in the driveway when you were supposed to be out. I checked the desk drawer afterward. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, but the combination lock had been reset to 0. You always did that when you were a kid, opened a lock and forgot to scramble it after. Some habits never change. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to salvage this, how to keep him talking long enough for. What I can't figure out, he continued, is why you're doing this. What do you think you know? The wire pressed against my skin, a reminder that everything he said was being recorded. I just needed him to confess. Needed him to say enough that the police could act. I know Grandpa was planning to change his will, I said carefully. I know about the missing money from the company. I know you were in debt. And I know about the phone calls you made before he died. His jaw tightened. You don't know anything. You've got a bunch of disconnected facts and you're building a conspiracy theory because you can't accept that sometimes accidents just happen. It wasn't an accident. Yes, it was. Then why the burner phone? Why Derek Russo? Why create an alibi if you had nothing to hide? Silence. Long and heavy. Then, quietly, you're wearing a wire, aren't you? The blood drained from my face. What? That necklace. You don't usually wear jewelry like that. And you've been fingering it nervously ever since we got here. He shook his head, something like sadness crossing his face. Oh, Jennifer. What have you done? Dad, please. Take it off. No. Take it off, or I'll take it off for you. He moved fast, faster than I expected. His hand closed around my wrist, yanking me toward him. I screamed, tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Marcus! I shouted. Marcus, he knows. He. My father's other hand clamped over my mouth, cutting off my words. He dragged me backward, toward the bedroom door, his breath hot against my ear. I didn't want to do this, he hissed. I hoped you'd just let it go. Stay out of it. But you couldn't, could you? You had to play detective. You had to ruin everything. I bit down on his palm, hard. He swore and released my mouth for a split second, long enough for me to scream again. He's attacking me. He's... Then something cold and hard pressed against my temple. I went very, very still. Don't move, my father said. His voice was steady now. Calm. The voice he used during tense business negotiations. Don't scream. Just, don't. It was a gun. My father had a gun pressed to my head. I'd known, intellectually, that he might be dangerous. But knowing something and feeling the reality of it are two entirely different things. This was my dad. The man who'd taught me to swim, who'd scared away boyfriends with his gruff overprotectiveness, who'd cried at my high school graduation. And he was holding a gun to my head. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because I didn't have a choice. His voice was rough now, emotion finally breaking through. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to? He stopped. Took a breath. Your grandfather was going to destroy me. Take everything. Send me to prison for the embezzlement. I couldn't let that happen. So you killed him. I didn't have a choice, he repeated, louder this time. Everything I built, everything I worked for, He was going to take it all away over a few mistakes. A few debts. I was going to pay it back. But he couldn't wait. Couldn't give me time. He had to be righteous and judgmental, and his voice cracked. I didn't want to hurt him, Alex. I loved my father. But he left me no choice. There's always a choice, I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept talking. The longer I kept him talking, the more time Marcus and the police had to get here. You could have asked for help. You could have admitted you had a problem. Grandpa would have helped you. He loved you. He loved his precious integrity more. The bitterness in my father's voice was toxic. He was going to cut me off. His own son. Throw me away like garbage. What kind of father does that? The kind who has boundaries, I said quietly. The kind who believes actions have consequences. Well, he learned about consequences. The gun pressed harder against my temple. And now you will too. If you kill me, you won't get away with it. The police are already on their way. Everything you've said has been recorded. Marcus heard everything. Detective Rodriguez heard everything. It's over, Dad. Maybe. His voice was eerily calm now. But if I'm going down, I'm not going alone. You ruined everything, Alex. This is your fault. All of it. If you'd just left well enough alone, we could have had a good life. The money, the business, everything Grandpa built. It could have been ours. It was never yours. You stole it. You killed for it. I earned it. The gun wavered as his voice rose. I spent my whole life working for that man, living in his shadow, never being good enough. And when I made a few mistakes, he was ready to throw me away. So yes, I took what should have been mine anyway. And I'm not sorry. You're sorry enough to have a gun to your daughter's head. That seemed to shake something loose in him. His breathing was ragged. You weren't supposed to find out. You were supposed to be safe. I've been protecting you, keeping you out of it. By lying to me? By making me grieve a grandfather you murdered? I didn't murder him. The denial was reflexive, desperate. It was an accident. I went to talk to him. To make him see reason. We argued. He said he was done with me. That I'd never see another dime from him. That I'd destroyed the family legacy. And I pushed him. I didn't mean for him to fall down the stairs. It happened so fast. But you didn't call for help. You didn't try to save him. Silence. You watched him die, I continued, my voice hollow. And then you staged the scene. Broke the wine glass. Called 911 and played the grieving son. You let me believe it was an accident. You held me while I cried, and you knew what you'd done. I had to. His voice was breaking now. I had to protect myself. And you. If I went to prison, what would happen to you? At least this way, we had the money. We had a future. We had nothing. You destroyed everything that mattered. Somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens. My father heard them too. His whole body tensed. They're coming, I said. It's over. Put the gun down, Dad. Please. Don't make this worse. Worse? He laughed, a broken sound. How could this possibly be worse? You could kill me. You could make the last thing you ever do be murdering your own daughter. Is that really how you want this to end? The sirens were getting closer. I could hear car doors slamming, voices shouting. Police! We're coming in. My father's hand was shaking now, the gun trembling against my temple. Tears were streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. For all of it. I didn't mean for things to. Then put the gun down, I said gently. It's not too late to do the right thing. It's been too late since the moment I pushed him. Dad. The door burst open. 3 officers flooded in, guns drawn, shouting commands. Drop the weapon. Drop it now. Hands where we can see them. Time seemed to slow down. I could see everything with perfect clarity, the tears on my father's face, the officers' fingers on their triggers, Marcus appearing in the doorway behind them, his face white with fear. My father looked at me one last time. I really do love you, Jennifer. I hope you know that. Even if you can't believe anything else I've ever told you, believe that. Then he dropped the gun. It clattered to the floor and an officer kicked it away while 2 others grabbed my father, forcing him to the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back. He didn't resist. Just went limp, his face pressed against the hardwood floor that his own father had installed decades ago. I stood frozen, my legs refusing to work, until Marcus was there, gently removing the wire from around my neck, checking me for injuries. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I shook my head. I wasn't hurt. Not physically. But as I watched them haul my father to his feet and read him his rights, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I understood that some injuries don't show up as bruises or broken bones. My father looked at me as they led him away. His eyes were pleading, desperate, begging for, what? Forgiveness? Understanding? I had neither to give. The trial lasted 3 months. The prosecution built their case meticulously. They had the wire recording, my father's confession to pushing Grandpa, his admission of staging the scene. They had the financial records showing the embezzlement. They had Derek Russo, who flipped immediately and testified about being paid to create an alibi. They had the insurance agent, the accountant, the phone records. My father's lawyers tried their best. Argued diminished capacity, claimed the confession was coerced, suggested that his statement about pushing was metaphorical rather than literal. But the evidence was overwhelming. I testified. Spent 6 hours on the stand, answering questions about what I'd found, how I'd investigated, the moment when he put a gun to my head. I had to look at him the entire time, sitting at the defense table in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his expression carefully neutral. He never took the stand himself. His lawyers wouldn't let him. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Guilty of embezzlement. Guilty of attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to 35 years. I haven't spoken to him since the verdict. He writes me letters from prison, long, rambling things that alternate between apology and self-justification. He wants me to visit. Wants me to forgive him. Wants me to understand that he's still my father, that love doesn't just disappear, that family is supposed to stick together no matter what. I haven't opened a single letter after the first one. They sit in a box in my closet, unopened. Maybe someday I'll have the strength to read them. Maybe someday I'll be able to separate the man who taught me to ride a bike from the man who murdered his own father for money. But not today. I finished college. Graduated with honors in criminal justice. A decision I made during the trial, watching the lawyers work, understanding how the system functions and where it fails. I want to be part of fixing it. Want to help other people get justice the way I got justice for Grandpa. The money, all of it, the insurance payout, the inheritance, the business, went into a trust. I don't want it. Can't touch it without feeling sick. So it sits there, funding scholarships for students who've lost family members to violence, supporting victims' rights organizations, doing the kind of good that Grandpa Richard would have wanted. Turning blood money into something that might actually help people. I still go to the lake house sometimes. Sit on the dock where Grandpa and I used to fish, watching the sun set over water that looks like molten gold. Sometimes I can almost hear his voice. Legacy isn't about money, Alex. It's about the people you choose to be for the people you love. He was right. My father chose money. chose protecting his secrets. Chose violence over honesty, murder over accountability. And I chose justice. Even when it cost me everything. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I wish I'd never started investigating, never found the evidence, never set the trap that led to my father's arrest. They ask if part of me wishes I'd just let sleeping dogs lie, accepted the official story, lived with the money and the comfortable ignorance. The answer is no. Because here's what I've learned, the truth is a sword. It cuts, absolutely. It destroys comfortable lies and forces you to confront realities you'd rather ignore. Using it comes at a cost, sometimes a devastating one. But ignorance is a poison. It seeps into everything, corrupting good memories, tainting every interaction with the knowledge that something is fundamentally wrong even if you can't quite name it. Living with that poison would have destroyed me eventually, even if I'd never consciously acknowledged what my father had done. The truth hurt. God, it hurt. It took my father from me, shattered my family, left me grieving both a grandfather I'd lost and a father who was still technically alive but dead to me in every way that mattered. But at least I can sleep at night. At least I can look at myself in the mirror and know that when it mattered most, I chose what was right over what was comfortable. I chose my grandfather's memory over my father's freedom. I chose justice over family loyalty. And I'd make the same choice again. There's a photo I keep on my desk. It was taken at one of those Sunday dinners, back when I still believed in the fairy tale version of my family. Grandpa Richard is at the head of the table, his face creased with laughter at something someone said. My father is next to him, smiling, one hand on Grandpa's shoulder. I'm on Grandpa's other side, maybe 14 years old, caught mid-laugh at the same joke. We look happy. We look like a real family. And we were, in that moment. That happiness was genuine, even if it was built on foundations that were already crumbling. I keep the photo because it reminds me that people are complicated. That my father wasn't always a murderer, wasn't born evil or fundamentally broken. He was a man who made a series of increasingly terrible choices, each one making it easier to make the next, until he'd traveled so far down that dark path he couldn't find his way back. And it reminds me that I carry pieces of both of them. Grandpa's sense of justice and integrity, but also my father's capacity for doing whatever it takes to achieve a goal. The difference is in how we use those traits. Grandpa used his strength to build things, to create opportunities, to lift up the people around him. My father used his to tear down, to steal, to kill. And me? I'm still figuring out what I'm going to build. But I know it starts with truth. With refusing to look away from hard realities. With understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions. Detective Rodriguez called me last week. There's been some movement on Derek Russo. Turns out my father wasn't his only client. They're building cases against 3 other people who used his services to create alibis for various crimes. My testimony and evidence helped crack those cases open. You probably saved lives, Rodriguez told me. By refusing to let your father get away with this, you've helped us stop other people who were getting away with crimes because they were smart enough to manufacture alibis. That takes guts. Guts. That's one word for it. Some days it feels more like stubbornness. Or maybe stupidity. Or maybe just an inability to live with lies. But whatever it is, it's mine. My choice. My burden. My legacy. I think about Grandpa Richard a lot. Wonder what he'd think of how everything played out. Would he be proud that I pursued justice for him? Or would he be heartbroken that it meant destroying his son? Maybe both. Probably both. I like to think he'd understand that I didn't have a choice, not really. That once I knew the truth, I couldn't unknow it. Couldn't pretend the accident story was real. Couldn't benefit from money that was paid out because of a murder. He'd taught me better than that. Integrity isn't optional, he'd said in that eulogy my father delivered. It's the foundation everything else is built on. My father spoke those words over Grandpa's casket, probably never considering that they would ultimately condemn him. That his own daughter would use those principles to bring him to justice. But that's the thing about integrity, it doesn't bend based on convenience. It doesn't make exceptions for family. It's the foundation, which means everything else has to align with it or the whole structure collapses. My father forgot that. I won't. Next month, I start a new job. Victims advocate at the district attorney's office. I'll be working with people who've lost family members to violence, helping them navigate the legal system, making sure their voices are heard. I'm qualified for the position in ways I wish I wasn't. But if my nightmare can help prevent someone else's, if my experience can make the system even marginally more responsive to victims and their families, then maybe, some tiny piece of good can come from all this destruction. That's not redemption. I'm not naive enough to think that any amount of good work will erase what my father did or make this story have a happy ending. But it's something. It's a choice to build instead of destroy. It's a choice to use my pain as a tool for helping others rather than as an excuse to become bitter and broken. It's the choice Grandpa would have wanted me to make. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the moment in the lake house when my father had the gun to my head. How close I came to not making it out of that room. How easily that story could have ended with my body on the floor next to where they found Grandpa's. And I think about what he said, I love you. Even if you can't believe anything else I've ever told you, believe that. Here's the terrible truth, I do believe it. I believe my father loved me. I believe he never wanted to hurt me. I believe that in some twisted, compartmentalized part of his brain, he thought he was protecting me by killing Grandpa and claiming the inheritance. Love isn't always enough. Sometimes people who love you can still destroy you. Can still choose their own comfort over your well-being. Can still lie to your face and sleep soundly at night. My father loved me. And he also would have killed me to protect his secret. Both things are true. Learning to hold that contradiction. To understand that love and harm aren't opposites, that people can be both your hero and your villain, might be the hardest lesson I've ever had to learn. I went to Grandpa's grave yesterday. First time in months. Sat on the grass next to his headstone, tracing the letters of his name with my finger. I got him, I said out loud, not caring if anyone heard me talking to a piece of stone. It took everything I had, but I got him. He's in prison. He'll be there for a long time. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. The world kept spinning, indifferent to one man's justice or another man's crime. I wish you were here, I continued. I wish I could ask you if I did the right thing. If you'd be proud or disappointed or angry that I tore the family apart to get justice for you. No answer. Of course no answer. The dead don't speak, no matter how much we wish they would. But I think I know what Grandpa would say. I think he'd say that family isn't about blood, it's about choices. It's about the values you share and the principles you refuse to compromise. It's about being the kind of person who can look at themselves in the mirror without flinching. And by that definition, my father stopped being family the moment he decided money was worth more than his father's life. So that's my story. The story of how I discovered my father was a murderer, how I set a trap to catch him, and how I watched him be led away in handcuffs while he cried and begged me to understand. It's not a happy story. There's no redemption arc, no heartwarming reconciliation, no moment where love conquers all and everything works out fine. But it's a true story. And truth, I've learned, matters more than comfort. If you take anything from this, let it be this: pay attention to the people around you. To the little inconsistencies, the things that don't quite add up, the moments when someone you trust acts in ways that contradict their values. Because monsters don't usually look like monsters. They look like your father. Your brother. Your friend. They're charming and loving and kind, right up until the moment they're not. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you suspect someone you love of doing something terrible, don't look away. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid or that you're making something out of nothing. Investigate. Ask questions. Demand the truth. It might cost you everything. But the alternative, living with the poison of willful ignorance, will cost you even more. I'm sitting in my apartment now, writing this, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. Trying to turn my trauma into something coherent, something that might help someone else recognize the signs I missed. The box of unopened letters from my father sits in my closet. Maybe someday I'll read them. Maybe someday I'll be ready to face whatever rationalizations and apologies and desperate justifications he's written. But not today. Today, I'm choosing to remember the grandfather who taught me about integrity. The man who built something lasting not through money or power, but through the consistent choice to do what was right even when it was hard. That's the legacy I want to honor. That's the person I want to be. And if that means I had to destroy my relationship with my father to do it, if it means I'll spend the rest of my life carrying the weight of being the one who put him in prison, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. Because in the end, we're all defined by our choices. My father chose murder. And I chose justice. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear. It wasn't easy to live through, and it's still not easy to talk about. But I share it because I believe someone out there needs to hear this. Maybe you're in a situation where something doesn't feel right. Maybe you've noticed inconsistencies in someone's story, or you have that gut feeling that won't go away. Trust that feeling. Investigate. Ask the hard questions. If this story touched you, please hit the like button. This will help more people find this channel and these stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Midnight Revelations and turn on notifications. Every day, I share stories of this kind: betrayal, courage, justice, and survival. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you ever suspected someone you loved of hiding a terrible secret? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision I faced. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's questioning their reality or living with suspicions they're afraid to voice, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward finding the courage to act. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, the truth might hurt, but living with lies will destroy you. I'll see you in the next story. This is Midnight Revelations, reminding you that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to look away. Please don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel.